limits. Patricia Gibson.
Chair. The loss of a child is of such magnitude, such a life-shattering experience, that leave for bereaved parents simply cannot be left to the goodwill of employers and must be put on a statutory footing. And I want to extend my thanks to the Honourable Member for East Renfrewshire for bringing this important debate forward and to sensitive and consensual approach. And I also want to put on the record, even though he's not in his place, that, like I think everybody else in this debate, I'm extremely supportive of the private members' bill from the Honourable Member for Thirsk and Malton's on this issue. And I think, from what I've heard today, everybody in this chamber will be supportive of that. Any decent employer, of course, would respond to a tragedy such as this by being understanding. But we cannot, as I have said, leave this simply to the goodwill of employers. And the examples that the Honourable Member for East Renfrewshire has given us today shows why that is the case. The law should and must rightly recognise the effect of such an event on any working parent, in any industry, in any sector, and provide statutory support and protection to them. Today, Mr Chair, I stand to speak on behalf of the parents who suffer the devastating loss of a child from the perspective of somebody who's had to bury her own son. And like the Honourable Member for Colchester, I too, as a Member of Parliament, feel a duty and a drive to make things better for those who have the terrible misfortune to go through such an event. Under the law, when it happened to me, my leave was protected, as the Honourable Member for East Renfrewshire pointed out, in such circumstances, because my son was stillborn at full term. My maternity leave of 6 months was still available to me. It wasn't available to my husband, and he coped as best he could, taking actually very little time off work, but still stumbling through his grief. It's time the law recognised the loss of a child and its effect on bereaved parents at whatever stage in the life of that child takes place, with rights to paid leave. According to Bereavement UK, 28 young people under the age of 25 die every day. 28 families torn apart. No one can adequately describe what it's like to bury their own child. It goes, as the Honourable Member for Strangford pointed out, it goes completely against the natural order of things. The numbness, the sense that the world has ended, the inability in the midst of that shock to comprehend how the world can possibly continue to turn and go about its business. And the loss of a child cannot be quantified by a set period of time, but the law must do what it can to create some kind of statutory space to grieve. When you lose a child, the challenge is not about whether you can go back to work on Monday. The challenge is how to keep going. When breathing requires a conscious effort, when getting out of bed in the morning becomes a goal in itself. Even months, years later, you can find yourself doing quite ordinary, mundane tasks, and quite unexpectedly, a wave of grief will wash over you like a tidal wave, taking you completely by surprise. As the Honourable Lady pointed out, ongoing support in such circumstances would be welcomed by many parents. For myself, I spent months unable to leave the house and lost interest in the world. Eating became a thing that had to be done, not something that you wanted to do. Every morsel that you put in your mouth is a struggle. And many parents who have been through this will identify with it. And yes, the loss of a child can often give way to thoughts of suicide for parents. After all, the entire future that you envisage for yourself has changed irrevocably, and only a gaping shadow of grief that will stay with you forever seems to be left. Around 60% of childhood deaths in the UK occur within the first year of the child's life. Emotionally, it cannot be prepared for, and it can never be truly and fully recovered from. However, with support, such parents find a way forward. Gradually, they find a way to build a semblance, and often it is only a semblance of some kind of life around the shadow that forever is cast over their lives. The loss of a child becomes an integral part of your life and lives with you every single day. All loss, of course, is hard to bear, but the loss of a child is the loss of a parent's investment in the future. In our children, is our physical embodiment of our investment, hopes and confidence in the future. When that is gone, what is left? The magnitude of the loss must be and should be recognised by society, enshrined in protections and support in employment law, and for the self-employed as well, as has been pointed out. In these terrible circumstances, parents go on because there is really no alternative. They find a way to cope for the sake of other people in their lives who love them and need them, perhaps their other children or their spouse. But what such parents need are rights enshrined in the Employment Rights Act, recognising the devastating loss of a child and the awful, horrific effects it can have, and give these parents time to grieve with full pay. This must be a fundamental workplace right for parents in any civilised society. What decent employer could possibly object to that? I urge the Minister to pursue this measure with all due haste to ensure that all parents who go through this nightmare to put paid bereavement leave for the loss of a child on a statutory footing. Yeah.